Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be here. Happy New Year to everyone. It's good to be back to kick off the first episode of the year, and an important one at that. My name is Matt Glova. I'm one of the advisors here at LifeTime Asset Management. Celebrated my 10-year anniversary next year. It's been a good 10 years, and I want to welcome you to the first episode of the year of the Lifetime Learning Series webinars. Today's topic is one that I've been looking forward to covering for some time. It really is a critical, important topic for all of us in many ways, and really the cornerstone of a good financial plan. And the topic is on budgeting, featuring Lifetime's very own guest speaker. Before we get started, want to let you know that we're welcome to answer your questions after the webinar. If you would like to email questions to info@lifetimeasset.com. That's info@lifetimeasset.com. And if we have time, we will get to those questions on the webinar today live. If we run out of time, we will certainly address those directly with you after the fact. You can always, at any time, email us directly at our work email addresses, or for any of those that watch the recorded version of this later on, please always feel free to email us at info@lifetimeasset.com, and we'll address those as they come. Speaking of recording, this session is going to be recorded, and so you can rewatch it and share it with friends and family later on as needed. It'll be posted to our website. I believe we're on 1 to 2 week delay of completing these webinars and getting them posted to the website, but you will our webinar bank of videos on there currently of all the past ones that we have done last year. And so we're extremely fortunate today to have Leslie share her wisdom with all of us, and allow me to introduce her to you. Leslie is a wealth consultant and the Director of Financial Planning Services with Lifetime Asset Management. She spent the first part of her career life as a Geographic Information Systems specialist for a natural gas utility, but in 2016 decided to pursue her passion for personal finance and financial planning. Leslie enrolled in the Duke University Executive Certificate in Financial Planning program, where she met fellow Lifetime executive team member Alan King, and she completed the program in May of 2017 and passed the exhausting CFP exam a few months later, and joined Lifetime Asset Management in January of 2018. In addition to her CFP designation, she's also a Certified Student Loan Professional, or CSLP, and she has her MBA from NC State. And I can certainly speak on behalf of all of our team members, and I'm sure all of the clients that have had any communication with Leslie, that we are very fortunate to have her as part of the team, and she's a vital part of what we're doing here at Lifetime for clients and helping everyone out there. So Leslie, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to put this webinar together. And really to start us off, Leslie, I know you're very passionate about personal finance and helping people set a budget. Why do you think a budget is such a vital and important part, an important tool?
Thanks. First of all, thanks for the introduction, Matt. It was very kind. I'm glad you decided to keep me. The budget is an important tool for keeping us on track to meet our spending and saving goals, which in turn helps us fulfill our life goals, which may be something like buying a home, or sending our kids to college, or pursuing our passions, or retiring in comfort. The problem is the budget, it's relatively easy to create, but it's really hard to follow. And it's frustrating when an expense crops up that we didn't account for in the budget, so we just give up. So hopefully the tips.
It's kind of like everyone's New Year's resolution, right? Where everyone starts off the year with such a master plan to exercise and create a budget, but it's the follow through that's important, is what you're saying.
That's right, and staying motivated, and hopefully, not giving up. Hopefully the tips and ideas I'm going to share today are going to help us stay on track to fulfill our hopes and dreams. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so before we get into the mechanics of budgeting, let's step back and establish our paradigm and our purpose for creating the budget by asking why. And I heard someone say recently, your why should make you cry. And I thought that was a great statement because it gets to the emotional drivers that motivate us instead of the logical reasons to do something, especially like, something like budgeting that most people dread. Classical economics and finance are based on the premise that human beings are rational creatures, but in recent years, the field of behavioral finance has come to the forefront as researchers have realized that people just don't act in logical ways. As it turns out, personal finance is less about head knowledge and a whole lot more about behavior. So by determining our why, we get to the root of what money means to us as individuals. For some, it means security. Having a big pile of cash on hand provides comfort and security. For others, it means the freedom to do the things that spark joy, like traveling or pursuing a passion. Or maybe it means being able to step back from work to spend more time with family. So if you haven't reached your fill of your family during quarantine, when life is busy,
who it was that reached out for the callback?
So we need to take time to step back to figure out what brings value to our lives. And ultimately, this should be the motivating factor when it comes to our money. There's a classical personal finance book called Your Money or Your Life. It was written almost 30 years ago by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. And it poses the question, how much are you trading your life energy for? In other words, how many hours of work does it take to acquire the newest iPhone, for example? So the iPhone 12 Pro, it has a list price of $999. I had to look that up because I'm not a gadget nerd. But let's say you clear $20 an hour net of taxes. This means you would need to work 50 hours to pay for that phone. So the question is this worth it to you? And the answer may be yes. But if you move through this exercise with all your spending, you may find that there are certain purchases that are not worth the life energy you're expending. The FIRE movement has taken this idea that Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez posed to an extreme. And FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It's been gaining momentum in recent years, especially amongst millennials. And the goal of the FIRE followers is to save, 50% or more of their income in order to quote unquote retire or make work optional in their 30s or 40s in order to spend more time on the things they enjoy. So yes, so first start with your why. And now that we've established our paradigm or our framework for budgeting, the next step is to think about, and most importantly, write down your goals, which are most likely going to be a combination of short, medium, and long-term goals. So short-term goals have a time frame of a year or less, and these are an example of a short-term goal may include an emergency fund or saving for a vacation. Medium-term goals have a time frame of 1 to 5 years. And these may include things like saving for a new vehicle purchase or down payment for a home. And long-term goals have a time frame of 5 years or longer, and they may include saving for retirement or saving for college education for your kids if they're young. But no matter the time frame, the goal should be SMART, and you've probably heard this before. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely or time-based. So an example of a SMART goal might be, I want to save $1,000 as a starter emergency fund that's going to provide a buffer to me while I'm trying to get out of debt. And I want to have that money saved by the end of 2 months. And to save that money, half of it I'm going to save out of cash flow, and the other half I'm going to save from a yard sale. So it's specific. I'm going to save $1,000. It's measurable. You can see that money accumulating in your bank account, so you can measure it. It's achievable, or we hope it's achievable. We've got a plan for how to do it by saving half from cash flow and half from the yard sale. It's relevant because I want to get out of debt, and I want to make sure I have a little money set aside in case an unexpected expense comes up, so I don't derail my plan. And then it's time-based, so 2 months. You know, I want to have it done by 2 months. Now you notice that the goal has several components, so you want to break those down into their component steps. You know, just to make it a little easier. I don't know about anybody else, but I like to have a checklist. So let's say for the yard sale, you scour your house for items to sell, select a date and time for the sale, apply for permits, assign the price tags, go to the bank for cash, and then, you know, stage the yard sale and then hold the yard sale. So break these down into their component steps. Okay. So now let's get into the budgeting. And to many people, budget is a 4-letter word. Christine and I coined budge yesterday, B-U-D-G, is a 4-letter word. And we don't like budgeting because it implies constraints or limits. So let's not call it a budget. Let's reframe it as a conscious spending plan, which I did not come up with this on my own. This is from Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. So let's, you know, instead of looking at a budget as prohibitive, let's look at it as a tool that enables us to do or achieve the things that we value. So last spring, you know, when everything started shutting down due to the pandemic, you probably noticed how much less you were spending. You know, we weren't eating out, we weren't going to concerts or events, we weren't getting haircuts. You know, I certainly noticed, and I realized there were certain things I didn't miss all that much, but there were other things that I did miss, like massages and pedicures. So maybe you noticed something different or something similar. And so you can use those observations as your impetus for creating your conscious spending plan. So when we start creating our budget, there's some generally agreed upon guidelines for how much we should devote to spending versus saving. So about 50% of our income should be for needs, 20% for savings, and then 30% for guilt-free spending or wants or discretionary spending. And within the savings budget, the 20%, you can break that down and get that even further with 10 to 15% going towards retirement, and then the other 5 to 10% towards emergency savings or a house down payment or new car fund. So splitting, you know, we'd like to see at least 10% going into retirement, but it does depend on your situation. Okay. So let's define needs versus wants. Now this should seem fairly self-explanatory, but some people struggle with the difference. So let me try to give you some good guidelines. So when we talk about needs, think of the 4 laws. So starting with food, we all need food to survive. But this is groceries, so your basic food budget. Basic clothing. If you're like me, you never need to buy clothing again because your closet is completely full. But if you got kids, young kids, you're buying clothes all the time because they're always growing out of the clothes. So having a basic clothing budget as one of your 4 walls. Transportation. So this is, your car payment if you have a car loan, maintenance, fuel, public transportation if you use public transportation. So all the costs associated with transportation, and then shelter is the other wall. So that's your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, home maintenance, HOA dues, whatever it takes to maintain your shelter. And let's then throw in medical insurance as our roof, because if we don't have our health, not a lot else matters. And then wants, these are things like eating out and entertainment, or travel, vacation, hobbies, gadgets, and my favorite, shoes. So hopefully that makes clear needs versus wants. All right, so now getting more into the mechanics. What kind of budget, or how do we budget? So I'm going to talk about 2 different kinds of budgets. And I'm going to start with a zero-based budget. And this is a method that has you allocate all your income between expenses, savings, debt payments, so that your income minus your expenses equals 0 at the end of the month. So here are some steps to take for building your zero-based budget. First is knowing your income, specifically your net income after taxes and other deductions from your paycheck or your Social Security pension, whatever your income source is. Now, if you're a 1099 contract employee, make sure that you are setting aside enough for taxes. This is a thing that trips a lot of self-employed people up. So make sure you're setting that aside off the top before you budget for everything else. Next, you want to determine your current spending. So start with your monthly fixed and non-discretionary expenses. So those 4 walls we were talking about. And don't forget irregular expenses. You know, some people pay their car insurance twice a year. Or, you know, if you don't escrow your property tax or homeowner's insurance, you're paying that once a year. So make sure you're planning for that. The one that trips me up every year is my car registration and property taxes and the vet bill, which all happen in the same month. November is a bad month. And then determine your discretionary spending. So you can try a couple of different things here. You can go back and maybe review your credit card and bank statements for the prior 12 months. So if you use a credit card, a lot of credit card companies kind of categorize your spending based on, you know, whether it's retail or, you know, they try to categorize it for you. So you might get some clues there about what you're spending in certain categories. The other thing you can do is to track your spending for a few months. And I think this is a good exercise for people to do, because when you start paying attention and writing it down, you start to see areas where you may be overspending, and then you can't believe how much you're spending on certain things. So I think it's a really good exercise. Next, categorize your expenses. So identify all your priorities and expenses, including needs and wants, debt, payments, emergency fund, and other savings goals. And finally, implement the budget. And there are several budgeting apps that you can use that are based on the zero-based concept, which include every dollar and you need a budget. You can also use an Excel spreadsheet if you're an Excel nerd like me, or you could just write it down on paper. So whatever works for you. So the other budgeting strategy I wanted to discuss was the bucket strategy. So some of you, we have bucket investment strategies, and this is kind of similar, but for your budget, your savings and spending goals. So this is going to work, the bucket strategy is going to work better for people who have a little extra buffer in their budget. For those who are living paycheck to paycheck, or you're aggressively trying to pay down debt or save for a specific goal, the zero-based budget is probably where you want to start. And then eventually you may be able to graduate to the bucket strategy. And the bucket strategy aligns closely with the 50, 20, 30 spending and saving ratios we discussed earlier. So bucket one, this is your needs. So you have, set up a primary checking account, and this is the account from which all your monthly bills are paid. And the amount you set aside should be fairly, each month should be fairly consistent and predictable. And you want to make sure you set aside here enough to cover a full month worth of payments. And then anything that's left over, you shift to the other two buckets. So the second bucket is the savings bucket. So saving for retirement and non-retirement goals. So many of you may already be saving into an employer plan from your paycheck. So let's assume you're abiding by the 20% savings rule and you're putting 10% into your 401k. Then the remaining 10%, you're going to divide between the other savings goals, whether it's emergency savings, education savings, whatever that may be. And finally, bucket three is the discretionary spending bucket. And so after you've satisfied your needs and your savings goals, everything else goes in the discretionary bucket, which is preferably a separate checking account, or you're using a cash system, which these days is not practical with COVID and everybody's gone to credit card payments. But anyway, this is what's going to remain after your monthly bills and savings goals are taken care of. And these are funds you can spend guilt-free on whatever you want to. So That's the second strategy. So hopefully one of those two strategies speaks to you. So as I've mentioned, there's quite a few budgeting tools out there. So if you're a client, you have access to our eMoney Wealth Management tool. And if we have not provided you access, just let us know and we'll be happy to set you up with access. And there is a spending and budgeting tool in the client side of eMoney Wealth Management. I mentioned you need a budget and every dollar, which are zero-based budgeting apps. There's also popular ones are Personal Capital, Mint, Quicken has an app or software. And then there's free budgeting spreadsheets. Just Google budgeting spreadsheets and you'll find a ton of them. So, you may have to play around with one or more of these to see which one works best for you. But Personal Capital actually did a study of their users and found that the average user cut spending by 16% in the first 4 months by using an app to track spending. So these are great tools to help keep you on track. So, budgeting doesn't always go smoothly. And generally, once you set up your budget, it's going to take probably 2 or 3 months or more to get it going the way you want. You might have to tweak a few categories here and there. But then there's some other challenges that I'm going to go through one by one. The first one is if your expenses exceed your income. Okay. And this could be it could be overspending. That might be one reason. Or, maybe you just don't earn enough to meet the needs, your non-discretionary spending to meet the 4 walls. So what are the solutions? So there's two things you can do. You can increase your income or you can decrease your spending. So increasing income, well, you could go in and ask for a raise. Now I don't recommend going in and asking your boss for a raise because you don't have enough, you're spending more than you're making. That's probably not going to go over very well. Do your research. Maybe you are underpaid. And so go in with some solid research on what the average pay is for your position, your industry. List your accomplishments, list what you're doing to bring value to the company. So go in prepared. You could develop a side hustle or find a part-time job. Amazon's hiring right now. Or maybe you have a talent where you can develop a side hustle and you can monetize that talent or that passion. And more radically, you can find a better paying job or career. This may take a little bit more time and investment on your part in terms of retraining or getting some education to make that leap. But in the long run, it may pay off. To decrease spending, first look at where you can make the biggest bang for your buck. So 2 major categories account for the vast majority of spending, and that's housing and transportation, which may also be the hardest ones to cut. But hey, right now interest rates are super low. So if you haven't refinanced your mortgage, that may be a good way to lower your monthly payment. You could, if you have a 15-year mortgage, you could refinance to a 30-year, just to give yourself some breathing room. I wouldn't recommend this if you're going up in interest rate though. But, that may be something you just, there's not a quick solution to your income needs. And that may be something you need to do. And then later on, when you get things more under control, increase your income, you can pay extra on your mortgage and shorten the term. You may need to downsize. That's a pretty radical move, but maybe it's necessary. You could get a roommate, do Airbnb, although again, with COVID, not a great time for that. As far as transportation, you could go down to 1 vehicle. A lot of companies are going to continue letting people work from home. So maybe you don't need that second vehicle anymore if you're not driving into the office every day. Some other places to look are cable, cell phone, and subscription services. A lot of people are cutting the cable cord. these days. Maybe you can find a cheaper cell phone package, and maybe you've accumulated a lot of subscriptions, especially during COVID, because what else have we been able to do? But take a look at that and see if there's some that you're not really using, and cut those out. And then, you know, what are you spending money on that does not bring value to your life? When you tracked your spending, did you notice that you were overspending on a category and you're like, why am I spending money on this? So maybe you identify one or two areas that you can cut that aren't going to affect you from a lifestyle, or, you know, a joy of life perspective. All right, so debt. So maybe you have a lot of debt. So what to do here? First is develop a plan, a debt management plan. And there are two main camps out there. There's the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. So the debt snowball, you may be familiar with. Dave Ramsey has popularized this method. So with the debt snowball, you list your debts, smallest balance to largest balance. You pay minimum payments on all the debts, and then you pour as much money on that smallest debt as you can until it's paid off. And then you take that money and you apply it to the next one, and snowball your debt. And this is taking a psychological perspective. You know, you're going for the small wins that motivate you to keep going. The debt avalanche, on the other hand, this is the mathematically correct way to do it. So for you math nerds out here, this may be your method, but you list your debt's highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, and, you know, pay minimum payments on all of them, but attack the one with the highest interest rate first. But, you know, again, even though it's mathematically correct, you may lose momentum if it feels like you're not making progress. So there are some calculators out. You can Google this. There's snowball versus avalanche calculators, and you can enter all your debts, and it will tell you how long it will take you to pay off in the snowball, using the snowball method versus the avalanche method. And I've done this for a couple of folks, and it, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of a couple of months. So you may find that it doesn't really make much difference which one you choose. So you know, you might want to go with the one that's more psychologically motivating, the snowball. And just some key debt ratios to keep in mind. Consumer debt, this is credit cards, car loan, student loan, what we consider consumer debt, should not exceed 20% of net monthly income, and that's monthly income after deductions, taxes are taken out. A good guideline for housing costs, which is rent or your mortgage payment, including property tax and insurance, should not exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. And then total debt, no more than 36% of gross monthly income. So if your debt payments exceed these limits, you're just going to have a really hard time getting ahead. So another challenge is if you have a regular income. So maybe you are, you know, you're in sales and you might have a base salary, but a lot of your income is commission. What do you do in that situation? So first, determine your minimum household spending. And that's what you want to cover first with your income. So pay those non-discretionary bills first. And then allocate the extra income to the other budget categories and savings. And you may need to, you know, you can prioritize those categories. So, you know, if you have a little extra income, maybe the first three priorities get spent first, and then down the line. And then, you know, it's really important to have an emergency fund, and I would lean towards 12 months of expenses for the lean times. Obviously, that's going to take some time to get to. And we'll talk about the emergency fund a little bit more here in a minute. But making sure you've got a good, you know, a slush fund for those months where your income is below what you need to pay your just non-discretionary expenses. Okay, unanticipated expenses. So these are those things like, you know, you get a flat tire, and you know, you have to replace your tire, or let's say you do something stupid and have to go to urgent care to get 5 stitches in your big toe. Me. So, you know, these are things that are going to happen. We don't know when they're going to happen, but we know something's going to happen. And they don't really rise to the level of an emergency. So add a budget line item here, and, you know, maybe it's $50, $100 a month, and then put that money, so there savings, if you use an online savings account, some of those accounts let you create buckets in your savings. So you can have an emergency savings bucket. You can have your sinking fund. So create a sinking fund here for these unanticipated expenses. And, you know, or you could have a vacation fund. So I think it's good to have those buckets. So when these kind of unanticipated things come along, you've got a little bit of a fund there that you can pull from. You don't have to put it on a credit card, and you don't have to pull from your emergency fund. All right, emergencies. So first, let's define what constitutes an emergency. These are unexpected events that have the potential to be financially catastrophic, such as a job loss, a medical crisis, or a global pandemic, which wraps up the job loss and medical crisis all in one. Or, you know, you have to cut back on work to take care of your kids that are now all of a sudden schooling from home. So that's what, these are big financial emergencies. And having an emergency fund in place creates a buffer that buys you some time to look for a new job, or recover from the medical crisis, or possibly take more radical steps to shore up your finances. And it prevents you from having to borrow money that you may not have the income to repay at the time. And you may not be able to borrow if you don't have an income. So the recommendation is to maintain a certain number of months worth of non-discretionary expenses. And those are the expenses we've talked about, those the needs, the 4 walls, plus your roof, medical insurance. So for a single income household, the recommendation is 6 to 12 months of expenses. And for a dual income household, 3 to 6 months. And although, you know, the minimum is 3 months of expenses for a dual income household, you know, with what we've experienced over the last year, 6 months is definitely preferable. Now, you know, it's hard to accumulate 3 or even 6 months of expenses, especially if your budget is tight and you're trying to pay down debt. So in that situation, start with that starter or beginner emergency fund of $1,000 to $2,000. It's going to provide a bit of a buffer as you chip away at debt, or it buys you more time until your income increases, and it's going to help with the minor setbacks. It's not going to help with a major one, but it will at least help with some minor setbacks in the meantime. And then once you're able to throw more money into the emergency fund, then you start building towards the 3 or 6 or 12 months. Okay, so how do we stay motivated? So there's several. We can make it fun. We can try a savings challenge. So how about a no spend challenge? So pick a week or a weekend during which you don't spend any money except for routine bills. So, I mean, you got to buy groceries, you got to pay your mortgage, but you know, you don't eat out. You don't buy anything that's not necessary. Or you can do a pantry challenge. So don't buy any food until you've exhausted all the possibilities from your refrigerator and pantry. So this can be fun. You're getting creative, get inspired by all those chef shows you've been watching on Netflix. And then there's a 52-week savings challenge. So decide on a specific dollar amount you save every week for a year. Or you can save $1 the first week, $2 the second week, and so on. And if you follow that second strategy, you will have saved $1,378 by the end of the year. You can create visual cues. So you can put a picture of the vacation, that, you know, your dream vacation, your car, a car that you want to buy, or the home that you're saving for, on your refrigerator. You put it as phone wall, you know, wallpaper on your phone. Use Pinterest if you're into Pinterest. I've never figured out Pinterest. So visual cues will help keep you motivated. And then get the kids involved. You know, it can be hard to keep to a budget when you have a hard time. You know, if you've got kids, you have a hard time saying no to your kids. So try to get them involved. So for example, if you're paying down debt or you have a certain savings goal, create a chain of construction paper rings that represent, so each ring represents a certain amount, whether it's $100 or $1,000. And then when you pay that much debt or add that much to savings, have one of the kids cut a ring off the chain. And then when the chain is gone, you plan a fun way to celebrate, but budget for it, of course. Or you can do something like the thermometer that the charity fundraisers use. You can, you know, have it on you know, fill it in as you reach your goal, whether it's a debt or a savings goal. You could follow a personal finance blog or a podcast. There's millions of them out there that can help keep you motivated. I mentioned Dave Ramsey earlier. A lot of people like to watch the debt-free screams. We have them on YouTube, and that keeps people motivated. Or you can team up with an accountability partner. I think this is important if you're single. You know, if you're married, hopefully your spouse is on board and you can be each other's accountability partner. But if you're single, look for somebody who's like-minded, you know, following, you know, trying to reduce debt or save, and encourage each other. So that is all I've got. So I'm going to turn it back to Matt.
Great stuff, Leslie. I was taking several notes as you were going through the material and seeing the presentation and seeing you actually have this in writing. Verified a lot of stuff that I always do anyways, and being in the industry, you know, it's what I tend to be good at. But like the savings challenge, it reminded me, my wife and I don't do it anymore, but we had September of savings. That every year was our, you know, the September would come around and we would say September of savings, and we would use that whole month to watch our budget and be very cautious on what we did. And we did that for several years, and it worked so well that we stopped doing it. We need to get back to it. The visual goals is important. I remember doing that. I still do it. A specific example, when I graduated from college and was making cold calls starting off my career, and needed to get clients, and I had a picture of a big screen TV. I just wanted a big screen TV. I like watching movies and stuff, and so I had that next to my phone, and it got me motivation, kept me motivated to go and keep talking to folks. One of the things that I wrote down that did not work for me that you mentioned was that had the opposite effect, which was adding a roommate for being able to save. I added a roommate last year, and he's now 6 months old, and he's costing me a ton of money. So that could work the opposite way.
Qualify that as a paying roommate.
It does not work very well from a budget standpoint. Well, we certainly we can't thank you for taking the time to share all of this valuable information. You know, we as you know, Leslie, being a part of the team, we started this Lifetime Learning series because we really are passionate about financial literacy and spreading the knowledge and expertise of these topics. Many of these things are just not taught in school, you know, grades in colleges, and it's hard to find good information out there from people that you trust. And so hopefully our audience is taking advantage of what we're putting out there and the content that we're having on our website, and taking the time to do these presentations. So we certainly found today very valuable, and we really appreciate it. We have a couple of questions that I wouldn't mind getting to. Some of them came, you already answered them as we were going through the presentation, but a few of them are interesting, and I don't know if you can answer it in this one, or it would potentially be for another topic. But one of the questions, how much do I need to retire? And that's a very broad question, but we will put you on the hot seat and see if you can answer that one.
Well, it depends, and it's very, it's specific to each person. It depends on what you want your lifestyle to be in retirement. What do you want to spend? So really, how much you save depends on how much you want to spend, and that's something we can work with our clients to determine, what that number is. But there's not a one size fits all rule for everyone.
Definitely depends on how much you want to spend in retirement. Out of this one is what's the best way to budget for a one-time expense? And I suppose you can answer it with one of your techniques that you mentioned, but what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, and it kind of depends on, let's take a car, for example. I don't buy cars very often. So let's say you buy a car like once every 10 years. So you can either, take out a loan, which, that's not ideal. But let's say you have a loan, but you want to start planning for the next car purchase. Just keep putting that same amount of money that you're paying towards the car payment into a new car fund. But yeah, create a budget line item for that expense. It may be that, it may be a non-discretionary item. It may be a need, so it'll go in your needs bucket, or it may be, non-discretionary, and you need to work that into your non-discretionary, but your guilt-free spending bucket. Or if it is a non-discretionary savings goal, it could be in that 20% savings bucket, and maybe you need to reduce what you're putting into one of your other savings buckets for a period of time while you save for that expense.
Okay. Yep. We have one more that came in, and it's a two-part here. Thanks for hosting this webinar. I hope the slides will be available to us. To answer that one, I can. We're going to, it takes a couple of weeks. We'll get this posted on the website. You can reach out to us directly. Can we share these slides? Do you know, Leslie, specifically the PDF version of these slides?
I can check with compliance on that, but I don't see why not.
Okay.
Yeah.
They will definitely be on the website shortly, but we'll check on that on getting you the actual slide deck. And then the second part comment of this is, I recently heard a savings tip that I'm implementing this year. Have 100 envelopes and number the front from 1 to 100, shuffle them, and then each week put the cash amount in the envelope you choose. By the end of the 2 years, you'll have approximately $5,000.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great tip. Yeah, there's lots of cool tips out there online. So yeah, make it fun. That's what you got to do to stay on track.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Keep you motivated, keep you saving, and that's what it's all about. Well, let's see here. That is all the questions. Leslie, thanks for answering those, and for all of you that submitted the questions, thanks for engaging with us during the webinar. We're out of time for this session, but if you have any more questions, please feel free, like I mentioned, to email them to info@lifetimeasset.com, and we will reply back to them from there. We have many more webinars coming up. The current schedule is still the first and third Thursday of each month, so mark your calendar and head to our website for more information on those upcoming topics. The next one, next Lifetime Learning Series topic is by Dr. Michael Walden. Many of our clients have heard from Dr. Michael Walden in the past, pre-COVID, and several years in the past, we would host an event and have him actually come in and speak to our clients. This year, of course, we're just going to do it on this format and on January 21st. So keep an eye out for the invitation for Dr. Michael Walden, and he'll be presenting on the economy, the pandemic, how the pandemic has changed the economy, and what we can expect for this coming year. So that'll be an important topic to tune into. So thanks for your time, everyone, and especially Leslie. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And as a reminder, we'll be sharing this recording on the website very soon, so keep an eye out for that. Hope everyone stays safe out there, and we will see you soon. Thanks.